Kyle Larson wants Carl Edwards to drive his car during All-Star Race practice in North Wilkesboro, and Kyle Busch's future at RCR could be uncertain after 2025. What's going on, guys? It's Daniel, and welcome back to our video. We got some NASCAR and other motorsports stories discussed here today on the channel. Let's go ahead and just jump straight into those really quickly. We're first going to take a look at a ton of paint schemes that have been revealed over the course of the last couple days. Let's go ahead and just jump straight into them. The first paint scheme we're taking a look at is Joey Logano's 2025 Shell Pennzoil scheme that we'll see at the Daytona 500. I absolutely love this paint scheme, and personally, this should be the Shell Pennzoil scheme that Joey Logano has throughout 2025. I like the nostalgic look to it, love the colors, they look absolutely incredible, and I'm looking forward to seeing on the racetrack at the Daytona 500. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Gio Rogerio's 2025 JBL scheme that we'll see a majority race in 2025. This scheme looks really, really good. I love the utilization of the sponsorship on this truck. This looks really, really solid, and I think that Tricon did a really good job on this paint scheme. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Denny Hamlin's 2025 National Debt Relief scheme that we'll see in 4 races, including the 2025 Daytona 500. Scheme's alright in my opinion. It feels weird not seeing FedEx sponsor Denny at this year's Daytona 500, but I do think the car looks solid, and I'm looking forward to seeing on the racetrack at this year's Daytona 500. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Ryan Ellis's 2025 Rolling Plains construction scheme that I believe we're going to see at Phoenix Raceway. Scheme looks alright in my opinion. I do like the colors of it overall, and I think that DGM did a very solid job on this paint scheme in my opinion. The next paint schemes we're taking a look at are Carson Quaffle and Connor Zilich's 2025 Roto-Rooter schemes that we'll see in 4 combined races in 2025. These schemes look very similar to the one that Sam Mayer had in 2024, same with Connor Zilich as well. I think the colors look really, really good on them overall. I think Junior Motorsports absolutely knocked these ones out of the park. Next paint scheme we're taking a look at is William Sawalish's 2025 Starkey scheme that will see a select race, including at Circuit of the Americas. I really like the look of this car. The colors look really, really solid overall. I do think that Joe Gibbs Racing did a pretty good job on this one. I'm looking forward to seeing the racetrack this year. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Connor Mosak's 2025 Friends of Jacqueline scheme that we'll see at Daytona International Speedway. This also will be the second driver that's had this sponsorship. Of course, Sheldon Creed will have this sponsorship for a majority race in the Xfinity Series in 2025. Overall, I think this truck doesn't look as good as Sheldon Creed's, but it doesn't look too bad in my opinion. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Ryan Truex's 2025 BB Printing Company scheme that we'll see at Daytona International Speedway. Scheme looks alright in my opinion. I think the colors are decent on the car. It's certainly interesting. They're going with a different look for the 24 compared to the 26. Glad to see Ryan Truex back behind the wheel of the 26 though. Next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Bubba Wallace's 2025 McDonald's scheme that we'll see in quite a few races in 2025, including the Daytona 500. I think this McDonald's scheme looks really, really interesting. I think the colors on it look really, really good. I like the new look they've had the last couple years on it. They've gone back to that fresh look. I think this McDonald's car looks really, really promising. And the final paint scheme we're taking a look at is Eric Jones' 2025 Advent Health scheme that we'll see in the Daytona 500. Car looks alright in my opinion, a little better than the 2024 one, but I don't think it's absolutely great. I think there's definitely some things they could have done a much better job on for sure, but I do think all things considered, it's not a bad looking scheme in my honest opinion. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Busch Beer. As it was announced yesterday that Busch Beer will run a new ad with Ross Chastain as a regional spot in 11 different markets during the Super Bowl. It's going to be based around going in circles. Many of you who watched the Clash this past week and probably saw this ad at least a couple of times. And we're starting to see a lot more drivers get involved with sponsorships. We're seeing drivers go out and do big things. Busch has been doing a lot more stuff with Ross Chastain over the last year or so, and I think it's really cool that big sponsors like Busch Beer, which have been part of the sport for many years, are starting to do things with people like Ross Chastain. When you see commercials of Ross Chastain, you get the chance and opportunity to view that driver for the first time, and it might be able to create those fans that you're looking for. It worked in the 1990s, helped grow the sport, so I think having Busch Beer work with Ross Chastain in a pretty big way in this year's Daytona 500, I think it's absolutely awesome to see. And I think again, it's really exciting and pretty great that Busch Beer will get to run an ad in the Super Bowl coming up here in the not-so-distant future. Really exciting stuff overall, in my opinion. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the Truck Series race at Atlanta Motor Speedway. As it was announced yesterday that the start time for the Truck Series race at Atlanta in about 2 weeks from now has been adjusted. The start time for the truck race originally was going to be at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. The start time has moved up from 2 p.m. Eastern to 1:30 Eastern Standard Time. Now, why are they making this move? Well, one big reason why they're making this move is to try to give a little more time for the Truck Series race to get done, because you've also got the Xfinity Series race going on at the same day, which that will be taking place at 5 Eastern Standard Time. If you give it an extra half an hour, especially since the Truck Series can sometimes be very, very chaotic on the super speedways, like tracks like Atlanta Motor Speedway, it gives that opportunity to get the race done a lot quicker and a lot sooner as well. So I think that's a big thumbs up for sure. I think getting the race done as early as possible is the most important thing, and I think they made the right decision to move this one up. It's not like the Talladega race, which got moved half an hour back. I think this was the right decision to go ahead and move the start time back a little bit earlier. I think it was the right call to do that, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Hexagon Lab. As it was announced yesterday morning, the Hexagon Lab has officially partnered up with Hendrick Motorsports, and Hendrick Motorsports officially unveiled a new Hexagon Lab that's going to be revolving around technology at Hendrick Motorsports. Hendrick has said publicly there's been certain areas in their shop they've been wanting to upgrade over the last couple of years, and one of them is in regards to technology, among other things as well. Hexagon's had a lot of partnerships in other sports, I believe, so this is a really huge deal for Hendrick Motorsports, and it might be able to give Hendrick Motorsports a pretty big competitive advantage going into 2025. We know they've been really fast and really, really strong, but they definitely have struggled at the end of these seasons. So I think having Hexagon Lab come in and work with this, I think is absolutely huge to see for sure. And I do like the fact that Hexagon will come in and work with Hendrick Motorsports in 2025 to help the drivers like Chase Elliott, Kyle Larson, Alex Bowman, and William Byron throughout the 2025 NASCAR Cup Series season. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Norm Benning. As it was announced yesterday morning that Norm Benning will be running the Truck Series race at Daytona International Speedway, driving number 6 truck for Norm Benning Racing. He will attempt to qualify for the Daytona opener, and apparently he is going to have a very similar truck to what he had at Talladega, which he had a Hendrick Motorsports truck, which was a number 75 last year. Norm Benning was able to, I believe, qualify for the Truck Series race at Talladega Super Speedway and also qualify for a few other races in 2024. We do not know the rest of the schedule for Norm Benning in 2025 at this time. I would have to think he's going to run all the Super Speedway races. I would think Atlanta in the next couple weeks as well. He's probably going to enter that race as well. But I think that Norm Benning is going to have a decent chance and opportunity of the Hendrick Motorsports truck, but also we kind of have to worry about how many competitive trucks there's going to be, and there's expected to be about 41 to 42 trucks that are showing up at Daytona for the Truck Series race. I really hope Norm Benning can make it, because I think Norm Benning is someone that I really think has been around for a long time, and someone who I think would be cool to make it in the field once again. We'll have to wait and see what happens and what other drivers do show up for the Truck Series race, but I think Norm does have a solid chance and opportunity to make it at Daytona. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Zhou Guanyu. As it was officially confirmed yesterday morning that Zhou Guanyu will be joining Ferrari as a reserve driver in 2025. There's been a lot of speculation that this is going to happen for the 2025 season. Zhou Guanyu last year was with Alfa Romeo, which of course is a stake F1 team, and unfortunately lost his ride at the end of the year for, I believe, Gabriel Bortoleto going into 2025, and now he'll be working with Ferrari as a reserve driver. This could lead to a really interesting opportunity for Zhou, is that if he had interest in going over and, let's say, wanting to do the Le Mans 24 hours because of Ferrari's hypercar program they're going to have over there in the World Endurance Championship, this could give him an opportunity to do that. But if someone at the team ends up getting sick, like Lewis Hamilton or Charles Leclerc, he would be the first person in line to get the chance and opportunity to get behind the wheel. So I think that's a really cool thing that could end up happening. I don't think anybody wants them to get sick, right? But I think them getting the chance and opportunity to run some Formula 1 races, I think Zhou had a solid year last year. I think that'd be really cool to see. So we'll see what happens in regards to that, and we'll see what ends up for sure going down there. But I think it's pretty cool nonetheless that Zhou Guanyu will get the opportunity to work in Formula 1 as a reserve driver for Ferrari in 2025. And now we're going to head jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Dean Sicking. As it was officially announced and confirmed earlier today that Dean Sicking will be awarded the 2025 Landmark Award in the NASCAR Hall of Fame. Dean Sicking, for those who do not know, is someone who's very, very important in the history when it comes to safety. He was basically behind the creation of the safer barrier. Basically, it was created in 2002 and helped Indianapolis Motor Speedway create that safer barrier, and it's been one of the most interesting and one of the most important things when it comes to safety of the sport. We have seen a lot of really, really scary crashes and incidents in NASCAR over the course of the last 20 years, and the safer barrier has been able to help in a pretty massive way on that front. So congratulations nonetheless to Dean Sicking on being awarded that award. I think it'd be really cool if he got actually into the Hall of Fame in one of the classes, and I think down the road he probably will become eligible for that, but I think it's pretty exciting that he will have the opportunity to be awarded the Landmark Award. I think it's really awesome to see, and nonetheless, like I said, congratulations to Dean Sicking on being awarded the 2025 Landmark Award for the NASCAR Hall of Fame. Really exciting stuff in my honest opinion. And now we're going to head jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Chad Johnson. As it was officially confirmed yesterday morning that Chad Johnson will be the crew chief for Jimmie Johnson at this year's Daytona 500. Chad Johnson had joined Legacy Motor Club in the offseason as a director of vehicle performance, and Jimmie Johnson will have Chad as a crew chief. Last year, Chad Johnson, of course, crew chief for Ryan Preece for the last 2 years, and while Ryan Preece did have a couple good runs with the team last year, generally the team really struggled in 2024, and I worry a little bit about Chad Johnson being the crew chief in this year's Daytona 500, and here's why. Do I think that Chad Johnson is a horrible crew chief? No, I don't think he's an awful crew chief by any stretch of the imagination, but he is not a good crew chief either. He's someone that is known to not take a lot of bold risk and not a lot of bold strategies. And I think especially if how many open cars are going to be attempting to qualify for this year's Daytona 500, I think you're going to have to make some really bold strategies if you're going to want to go ahead and win. And I just feel like that, I worry about this a little bit too, that he's not going to be bold enough to make the moves that are going to be desperately needed to make the Daytona 500. Plus, Jimmie Johnson barely made it this year. And I do worry that Jimmie Johnson is not going to have the pace and speed overall. I think he's got a chance, don't get me wrong. I just worry that the consistent pace and speed is really not going to be there for Jimmie Johnson in this year's Daytona 500. It's a very stacked and very competitive field, and I think it's going to be interesting to see how that ends up going this year if Jimmie can make it. But Chad Johnson, interesting choice for sure. I really hope that with Chad and Jimmie working together that they can actually make the Daytona 500 this year. But like I've already mentioned and said, I think it's going to be very difficult for them to get it done. I really hope there's a chance for them to make it, but I think it's going to be hard, especially with the open cars that will be attempting to qualify for the 2025 Daytona 500 this year. And now we're going ahead to on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Greg Ives. As it was officially confirmed earlier today or yesterday that Greg Ives will be the crew chief for the number 40 car for Junior Motorsports at this year's Daytona 500. Remember, Junior Motorsports will be attempting to qualify for the 2025 Daytona 500. They will have partnership with Chris Stapleton and the Travelers Whiskey brand, and Justin Allgaier is going to be the driver. Now, Greg Ives, we know, is a pretty dang good super speedway crew chief, and one thing that Greg Ives is known for doing is setting up a car that is very, very well at super speedways. He has won multiple poles at times. I think he's won poles at Dale Jr. at super speedways, including the 2015 Summer July race at Daytona. And he is going to, of course, have a lot of help from Hendrick Motorsports. Now, this car is the favorite currently at the moment right now to make the Daytona 500 on pure pace and speed of the open cars. One, it's got a Hendrick engine. Hendrick engines, generally, for the last 10 or 11 years, have been the cars that have been able to go on and win the polls. The only exception was 2024, when, of course, we saw a surprise poll from the Fords with Joey Logano getting it done. I think one year we saw Ricky Stenhouse Jr. get the pole in 2020, but for the most part, the Hendrick Motorsports cars have been able to win these polls. So I think they've got a really good chance to win the poll this year, and I think there's definitely an opportunity to see Junior Motorsports in their first start have a chance, an opportunity to win the Daytona 500. And I think they will have a car capable enough, definitely for sure, to win the Daytona 500 later this year. Again, the most important thing is they're going to have to make sure they qualify the way officially into this year's Daytona 500. But I think they've got a really good chance here. I think they're going to have the pace and speed. I certainly think they're going to be super, super fast and super competitive for sure. And I do think that the number 40 car will be good. They're going to have to deal with people like Elio Castroneves, Chandler Smith to get in this year's 500. Of course, Mark Truex Jr. and Jimmy Johnson we mentioned just a second ago. But I do truly believe that there is a great opportunity and chance here. And I do think that the number 40 team will have the pace and speed to definitely be seriously competitive and definitely have the chance and opportunity to win the Daytona 500 later this year. We'll see if they can officially make the Daytona 500 in 2025. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Spire Motorsports. As over the course of the last several days, you probably have been noticing that Spire Motorsports has been revealing some of their rosters for each of their cars for 2025. On Tuesday, which we talked about on the channel, they revealed the roster for the number 7 car. Well, they revealed the other 2 rosters for Spire Motorsports teams in 2025. First, the number 71 car. It will be crew chief by Travis Peterson, who comes over for Front Row Motorsports last year, where you know Michael McDowell will be the driver of that number 71 car this year. And Michael Fisher, who is Michael McDowell's spotter over at Front Row Motorsports in 2024, he'll be the spotter also for Michael McDowell in 2025. Like I mentioned a second ago, a lot of the people from Front Row Motorsports in the number 34 team have followed Michael McDowell over with Spire Motorsports in 2025. And I really think there's a great opportunity and chance here where we could actually see the 71 team have an outside chance and possibility to make the playoffs. The 71 team with Zane Smith at the end of last year was showing a lot more consistent speed and increased performance. I think there's definitely a really good opportunity here for the 71 team to be competitive this year. As for the number 77 team, there's been not a ton of changes for 2025. Obviously, we know Carson Nospar is going to be the driver for this car in 2025, but Luke Lambert once again will be the crew chief for the number 77, and Tyler Green once again will be the spotter for the number 77 as well. This 77 team was super impressive in 2024. Carson Nospar had some really big standout performances and was legitimately a top 20 contender in the standings by the end of the year, and also won Rookie of the Year honors. I would not be surprised if Carson Nospar does make the playoffs this year. Of the 3 drivers at Spire Motorsports, I think Carson Nospar has the best chance and opportunity to definitely make the playoffs this season. So I look for this team to be very competitive, very, very strong, and really quick throughout the year and season. And again, I think that Spire Motorsports is setting themselves up for a really strong year this year, as I think the team's got a really strong lineup for all 3 cars going to 2025. I'm definitely excited to see what Spire Motorsports can do with the drivers they have in the 2025 NASCAR Cup Series season with these programs. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Ryan Preece, Noah Gragson, and Josh Berry. So over the course of the last couple days, Bob Pockrass has been releasing some very interesting interviews during production days. And a couple days ago, he put out all the 4 drivers that made moves for 2025 that spoke to Bob Pockrass. And 3 drivers in particular that have stayed in the 4 camp were talked to by Bob Pockrass about the transition away from Stewart-Haas Racing. That being Ryan Preece, who drives the number 60 car for RFK Racing in 2025. Noah Gragson, who will drive the number 4 car for Front Row throughout 2025. And Josh Berry, who moves over to the Wood Brothers in 2025. So far, all 3 of those drivers have shown some decent speed, at least at the Clash. Ryan Preece ended up making the final event, same with Josh Berry. And also Noah Gragson made the final event this year. They all spoke about the end of 2024. Ryan Preece did not feel any pressure at the end of last year. He kind of knew that things were going to be coming to a close, and Ryan Preece didn't feel like there was anything behind the scenes that was really affecting him in a big way. Despite the fact that Ryan Preece had said some interesting things in a comment section about a study group last year, about the other 3 drivers at Stewart-Haas Racing, saying that they were in a study group and he wasn't invited to that. But Ryan Preece now drives for RFK, and I think there's definitely a good chance of Ryan Preece to perform on a really strong note in 2025. Noah Gragson kind of said that he's really excited about the team he's built together for 2025. Of course, a lot of people on the number 14 for this year come from the number 10 car, Drew Blickenserver being the crew chief, and a lot of the crew members, and I think even the spotter as well, might be coming from Stewart-Haas Racing this year. So I think Noah Gragson could be someone that could be a big surprise in 2025. I really like the things they're doing over there for this year and season. I could see Noah Gragson definitely showing a lot of potential speed and some good stuff from the front front row camp later this year. And finally, Josh Berry. He definitely kind of had some interesting thoughts about it as well with Stewart-Haas Racing shutting down. He basically said, yeah, it was definitely kind of a lot of turmoil and a lot of chaos for sure, but he also said he's very excited about working with the Wood brothers in 2025. Overall, I think all three of these individuals ended up in a really good position this year, and I think that all three have a lot of potential to do really, really well in 2025. I'm excited to see what everyone can do this year and where the formats can end up being for the programs this year, but I do think that Ryan Preece, Noah Grace, and Josh Berry are all going to have really good seasons. Really good pace and speed is probably going to show up, and I do think that all three have a lot of potential to be very competitive and very, very fast in the 2025 NASCAR Cup season. Excited to see what they can do with the respective teams they're going to in 2025. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Richard Childress. Now, yesterday, Richard Childress was on the Dale Jr. Download, and he had a lot of very interesting comments throughout the podcast, which is about 96 minutes. If you actually listen to the podcast, I actually was able to tune into the full podcast, and I gotta say, a lot of things that Richard Childress said was certainly very interesting, but you probably noticed the headline coming from Twitter and the Dirty Mo Media page, and Richard Childress basically talked a little bit about the incident that took place at Richmond. And Richard Childress says he is still not happy about the outcome at Richmond Raceway and still says he feels very, very frustrated on how NASCAR penalized the team for what happened at Richmond Raceway. He basically said it's not just about the money, but he said that his team lost $3 million for the actions that they pulled on the racetrack at Richmond. Let's go back to the incident that happened at Richmond. So, there was a restart happening 2 laps ago. Austin Dillon was cruising the victory lane after passing late in the event. Pit stops happen. Joey Logano wins the race off of pit road. Coming off into the final restart of the race, Austin Dillon got straight up beat by Joey Logano on the restart. And on the white flag of the race, Austin Dillon completely sends it and floors into turn number 3, destroys Joey Logano, and wrecks him into turn number 3. Then his spotter, that being Brandon Manesh, who was Austin Dillon's spotter at the time, comes back down the racetrack and right rears Denny Hamlin into the outside wall. You had Denny Hamlin who was very frustrated and upset after the race, and you also had Joey Logano who was really, really angry. NASCAR took a couple days to make a decision on the front, but they decided to go ahead and penalize Rich Childress Racing. They let them keep the win that they had, but they were not able to use that win to be locked into the playoffs. RCR would appeal at multiple different times to try to get Austin Dillon in, and NASCAR would not budge, and they basically threw it out of the appeals office, and they completely threw it out. Here's the thing about the incident. Look, we've talked about this incident a lot on the channel. I think NASCAR absolutely at that point had to draw a line in the sand. And I understand why Richard is a little bit upset. Don't get me wrong, I'd be upset too if I got a win taken away. Well, a win got to be kept, but if I got a spot in the playoffs and then didn't have a spot in the playoffs, I would probably be a little bit upset. However, this is not the same thing, and I think that NASCAR really did make the right decision here, if we're going to be honest. Look, you cannot right rear somebody down the straightaway going down the front stretch. I don't care if it's a short track or not. You can't do that. You also can't just flat out send it into the corner and completely dump the guy to win a race. But Dale Sr. did that stuff, and he was praised for it. Actually, Dale Sr. was booed for doing stuff like that. Going back to 1986 at Richmond, Dale Sr. right reared, I believe it was Darrell Waltrip down the back straightaway on the last lap of the race. Dale Sr. got, I believe, a $10,000 fine after the incident. And I think there was other times where Senior got in trouble, and he got booed after taking out Terry Labonte at Bristol 26 years ago. So Dale Sr., as much as people want to say was praised for incidents like that, Dale Sr. was not praised for a lot of his incidents on track. Great job, but also at times drove dirty on the track. So while I do understand why Richard was a little bit frustrated and upset, I don't get why he's fully still upset with the situation. Look, you've got to move on from these situations. You did the actions, you have to pay the consequences. And if you can't accept the consequences that your team pulled on the track, I really don't know what to tell you, Richard. You guys have to learn from your incidents, and you got to learn from your mistakes. And if you can't learn from that, I don't know what to tell you at this point, Richard. So you got to step up, you got to own it, and I think the fact you're still pissed off is kind of mind-boggling to me a little bit. Because it's been a long time since the incident happened. It's been nearly a year at this point. 6 months since the Richmond race happened. And I don't think that Richard fully has 1,000,000% a right to be upset and pissed off about it. I would be upset too in the moment and in the grand scheme of things, but at the same time, Richard, your driver did it. You have to pay the consequences, and NASCAR is not going to tolerate stupid BS on the track like you've been pulling. I think they made the right decision, and I think they made the right call, and I think that NASCAR, at least for once, had the balls to step up and say, yeah, we're not going to accept this, we're not going to tolerate this, and we're not going to be doing this going forward. We need to stop doing this kind of stuff. Otherwise, it's going to be tolerated, and drivers are just going to do this and run into each other, and it's going to become the wild, wild west. I think NASCAR did the right thing by going ahead and stopping some of the BS that happened at that race, in my honest opinion. And now we'll go ahead and jump on the first of two major stories in today's episode as we're talking about Kyle Busch. Now, earlier in the last couple weeks during production days, Bob Pockrass interviewed Kyle Busch talking about all the big changes that have taken place at Richard Childress Racing heading into 2025. And Kyle Busch said he did like some of the changes that took place heading into 2025. However, there is a lot of talk and conversation going on at the moment about Kyle Busch's future at Richard Childress Racing. Going into 2025, this is a contract year for Kyle Busch at Richard Childress Racing. And going back to last year, we remember talking about this on the channel. There was a lot of rumors and speculation that Kyle Busch was not going to be back at Richard Childress Racing for 2025. And there was a lot of talk and conversation that Kyle Busch could maybe go back to Joe Gibbs Racing for 2025 or even go back to Hendrick Motorsports in 2025 as well as all the Alex Bowman rumors that were going around at the time. Inevitably, Kyle Busch in the middle of the year signed a 1-year contract extension with RCR and stuck around for the 2025 season. Now, Kyle Busch did like a lot of the positive changes that took place over there, but there's a lot of speculation currently at the moment about Kyle Busch's future at the program. To be honest with you, when it comes to Kyle Busch, I think Kyle Busch doesn't have as much pressure, unlike Daniel Suarez, who has a lot of pressure. Kyle Busch, if he left Rich Childress Racing at the end of this year, there would not be a lot of pressure for Kyle Busch to go anywhere at this point. Number one, Kyle Busch is still one of the most talented drivers in the world, and we saw how he did with RCR at the end of last year. He performed very, very well, showed a lot of speed, especially at the end of the year, and in the second half of the season, I think that A-car really showed a lot of improvement, kind of the opposite of what happened in 2023, where they started the year off on a really, really good note, and then the end of the year was a complete fall off. It felt like the opposite in 2024, but inevitably, there was a big fall off from the program in 2024 compared to 2023, and Kyle Busch had his first win this year with the team and program. If RCR does end up struggling this year, which I think there's definitely a really good chance and possibility that it could end up happening this year, what happens to Kyle Busch? Does he stick around with RCR? To be honest, I really don't know. I don't know if Kyle Busch sticks around with Richard Childress Racing, to be honest, because if RCR really, really does struggle in 2025 and Kyle Busch just doesn't take a big step forward, I think there's a very realistic chance and a very realistic possibility that Kyle Busch is not driving for Richard Childress Racing in 2026. So let's say Kyle Busch decides to leave the team at the end of this year. What teams could Kyle Busch end up going to in 2026? The first one to think about is Spire Motorsports. Spire Motorsports is already working with Kyle Busch. He's a consultant over there with their Truck Series program, and Kyle Busch is expected to make around 5 to 6 Truck Series starts this year, probably most likely number 7 or the 07 truck this year. He has made starts the last couple years in trucks, generally runs 5 races every year. You think about the contracts over there, there's been rumors about Justin Haley going to Hendrick Motorsports at one point. There's rumors about Carson Osbar going maybe to the 48 as well. So maybe he ends up over there at Spire Motorsports. Maybe Michael McDowell retires at the end of the year and Kyle Busch takes over the 71. That could certainly be a possibility. And I think Spire will be definitely one to watch out for this year. Another team, Kaulig Racing. Kaulig Racing is a big association with Richard Childress Racing, and I think bringing Kyle Busch into the pipeline would be huge. There were rumors a couple of years ago that Kyle Busch was actually going to go over to Kaulig Racing before inevitably he went to RCR. I think with the tight technical alliance and that team really needing big improvement, I could see Kyle Busch going over there and trying to build that program back up, especially since, no offense to Ty Dillon, but Ty Dillon really is not the best driver in the world, and Kyle Busch is leaps and bounds a much better driver than Ty Dillon. So I could see him going to Kaulig Racing. Another ride I could see him going to is leaving Chevy and going back to Toyota and going to 2311. The problem I see with 2011 is I believe all 3 drivers currently at the team are under long-term contracts, and we really don't know what's going on with the lawsuit. They could run a 4 full-time entry for Kyle, but it would have to be an unchartered entry unless with the lawsuit, Michael Jordan, everyone involved on that side of things, that could be a big thing that hurts Kyle Busch's chance to go over. There's been rumors about him going to 23-11 over the last couple of years, and that was one of the teams that was considered before Kyle Busch inevitably went to RCR, but I think that's one team to watch out for. You do got Legacy Motor Club as an option for 2026 because we know John Hunter may be a free agent at the end of this year. But does he want to go to a team that's really struggling? I don't know, to be honest. Legacy is a team that's really been struggling, and I just don't know for sure if Legacy would be the move to make if you want to get better improvement and show more pace and speed. Could he go to a team like Joe Gibbs Racing or Hendrick Motorsports? Maybe, but I don't see Alex Bowman leaving the team, and Alex Bowman is way too good, in my opinion, to be out of that seat. I'm get frustrated hearing all the rumors about Alex Bowman losing his ride. Alex Bowman deserves to be in that 48 car, so I don't want to see Alex Bowman lead the team because Alex Bowman is way too good of a driver to lose his seat at this point. So I think Joe Gibbs Racing is also a very big option to go into next year. Now, I do believe Denny Hamlin has a contract through 2026. However, I have a bold prediction Denny Hamlin may retire at the end of the year. If Denny Hamlin does struggle this season, I could definitely see him retiring because you're not going to get rid of Christopher Bell. You're not going to get rid of Ty Gibbs, who's a grandson, and Chase Briscoe is going to have multiple years to really prove himself over at Joe Gibbs Racing. So if Denny Hamlin does retire, I don't think there's anyone in the Toyota pipeline that's definitely ready at this point to move back up to Cup, right? I just don't see a guy like Brandon Jones coming in replacing Denny Hamlin, or they could sell the Charger to another team. That is certainly possible. I think it's all going to depend on what happens at RCR. And if Rich Cho's Racing struggles massively this year, I think there's a really good chance and possibility that Kyle Busch is not in an RCR car in 2026. But if the team really takes big steps forward and they run really well, let's say Kyle Busch gets multiple victories this year, maybe he sticks around with the team. But I'm telling you right now, I've got a really big feeling that this is going to be the last year for Kyle Busch at RCR. I'll throw Trackhouse as a possibility, especially if Connor Zilch doesn't pan out. I don't see Suarez sticking around with Trackhouse. Maybe he goes there for 1 year. Maybe other teams like RFK down the road could certainly be an option, but I don't know at this point. But I think it's going to be certainly interesting to see what Kyle Busch truly ends up doing in 2026 if he doesn't go back to RCR. I think there's definitely a chance he does go back to RCR, but as of right now, I'm not sure if he will go back to RCR in 2026, in my honest opinion. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the final major story of today's episode as we're talking about Carl Edwards. Now, we already talked a little bit about this on the channel earlier this week, but over the weekend during NASCAR production days, we talked about the fact that Carl Edwards, of course, will be inducted into the NASCAR Hall of Fame later this evening. And one driver that was talking a little bit about Carl Edwards was Kyle Larson. And Kyle Larson, of course, will be attempting to qualify for a second year in a row for the Indianapolis 500. And he needs a driver that is going to be able to drive his car during Indianapolis 500 practice when he's over there focusing on that. He is going to need a driver that can drive his car for All-Star race practice. One driver Kyle Larson mentioned is none other than Carl Edwards. Now look, Carl Edwards, we've heard him talk about maybe coming back at one point. We still don't know if he's ever going to come back. Now earlier today, Carl Edwards was speaking to media during media days, and Carl Edwards basically said he has not fully heard anything from some people at the team, but he also said he is not completely saying no. He's saying no at the moment right now, but he's not ruling out the possibility. He said he would have to get into the simulator and see how he does at North Wilkesboro, and if he does very well, he could definitely get the chance and opportunity. Now, obviously, Carl Edwards would not be coming back behind the wheel to do a race. It would just be for All-Star practice. It'd be very similar to what Kevin Harvick did in 2024, where Kevin Harvick had retired from full-time racing at the end of 2023, and Kevin Harvick drove the number 5 car for Hendrick Motorsports during All-Star race practice, while Kyle Larson was focusing on running the Indianapolis 500. Kevin Harvick got the opportunity. To be honest, Kevin Harvick looked very competitive out there and did a really, really good job. Carl Edwards looked really in good shape. And people like myself have been saying Carl Edwards should come back and at least do a one-off in the sport. If he just comes back, though, and does all-star race practice, to be honest, that will make me very, very happy. And I think it'll make a lot of fans very, very happy as well. Because people like myself feel like when Carl Edwards retired from the sport, it felt like there wasn't really that big closure. And we've all been clamoring for so long for Carl to come back and do a race or two. And if Carl doesn't want to come back and do a race or two, that is definitely fine. But getting back behind the wheel of a car for an all-star session, for a practice session especially, which isn't going to be very, very long, I think that'd be absolutely cool. And I think seeing Carl Edwards back in the sport as much as he's been the last couple of days and really the last couple of years since 2023, I think that's been one of the coolest things we have seen is him getting back around the sport. And he has expressed interest in doing some TV work. He spoke to Jenna Fryer very recently in an article, and he basically expressed interest in doing some television work. There was some outside talk and conversation about him maybe doing some stuff on Amazon and TNT this year, and there certainly is still a possibility we could see him do that. Carl Edwards, when he did the coverage, when Fox didn't have a full-time person in 2023, before Kevin Hart came in full-time in 2024, he sounded natural at Darlington. And when he was doing ESPN coverage back in the late 2000s, when he was doing it for the Xfinity Series, which at the time was a nationwide series and a Busch Series as well, he sounded like a natural and pro out there. He did very, very well in those, and I think Carl Edwards being on TV would be absolutely huge. I think if I'm Fox or another network, I'd be calling Carl Edwards up to get in a booth in some way, shape, or form, and I really hope that ends up happening as well for Carl Edwards down the road. But getting back to the big side of things, I think him getting behind the wheel of a Hendrick Motorsports car just for all-star race practice would honestly be something that I think would present a lot of closure that the fans really, really want to see. The fans have been begging for so long for Carl to come back, and if he comes back and does that and gets behind the wheel of a car just for all-star practice, I think many fans would be satisfied. We wouldn't have to clamor and say Carl Edwards come back. Same thing with Kurt Busch. We always clamor for him to come back and do one-off, which I think there's a chance that could happen too. But I think seeing him come back and race is incredible. We have seen a lot of drivers in recent years kind of come back into the sport out of nowhere. Jimmy Johnson, after he retired in 2020, we never thought he'd come back. Then in 2023, he made the comeback to the sport and started owning Legacy Motor Club. And then you think about what happened with Casey Kane recently. Casey Kane, he is going to go ahead and drive at Rockingham in the number 33 car for RCR. The first time we've seen him behind the wheel since 2018 when he retired suddenly after the Southern 500. I think many fans would be super, super happy to see Carl Edwards just come back and get back behind the wheel of a race car. Carl Edwards is without question one of the greatest drivers in the history of the sport. And the fact he is getting inducted in the Hall of Fame later today is honestly one of the most incredible things that I think fans really, really love. Carl Edwards, like I said, he is one of my favorite drivers growing up. And I think it's, again, just amazing that he will be finally getting inducted into the NASCAR Hall of Fame, which he's justified he got in. I didn't know if he was going to get in as quick as he did, but he got inducted in. 28 NASCAR Cup wins, multiple Crown Jewel victories at Coke 600 and the Southern 500, consistently up front competing for championships, especially from the beginning in 2005. He technically tied for second position. Gray Biffle got the tiebreaker because he had one more races during that season. And then, of course, you think about 2011, that incredible battle between him and Tony Stewart for the championship that year. 2016, we all know what happened there. A very unfortunate ending on that front. And I think that it's just been so cool since he left the sport in 2016. He retired all of a sudden about 8 years ago. I think most fans would be super, super happy to see him come back and be in the sport in some sort of capacity. And again, I really hope he does get that chance and opportunity if he really wants to, because he'll be the one to make the decision if he wants to truly get back behind the wheel of a car. He'll truly be the one that gets the opportunity to decide that at this point. But Carl Edwards racing once again, or at least driving the car at All-Star Race practice, that's what I think a lot of fans would absolutely be dying for and would really, really love to see. So I truly hope it ends up happening. I hope that Carl does get the chance and opportunity. It will be his decision overall what happens on that front, but I hope that Hendrick Motorsports will let him get that chance and opportunity. I hope that Kyle Larson can arrange for that to happen while he is focused on doing All-Star Race practice when he goes to Indianapolis Motor Speedway. So, that is going to today's long NASCAR news and motorsports news episode. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please subscribe to the channel, notifications on, so if I win a video, it does go live on my channel. Follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and support me on Patreon as well. Let's go below that and comment your thoughts below on today's episode. You think Carl Edwards will actually drive the Hendrick car during All-Star practice or not? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And you think Kyle Busch will come back to RCR in 2026? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. There should be another NASCAR news video dropping later today talking talk about all the other news we didn't discuss in the first video. Then this weekend, I'm going to have bold NASCAR predictions for 2025. On my second channel, I'll be doing my Super Bowl predictions. And I also will likely have a schedule predictions for 2026 as well, dropping this weekend. And probably a paint scheme video too. Got a lot of great content dropping over the course of the next couple days on people like Haley Deegan, Shane Van Gisbergen, Carl Edwards, Kurt Busch, Kyle Busch, Ross Chastain, Daniel Swartz, Chase Elliott, Bubba Walls, Ryan Blaney, all that good stuff. Carson Osterberg, Sheldon Creed, Sam Mayer, FedEx, M&M's, all that good stuff. We'll be talking about that on the channel really soon. So anyways, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's episode, and I'll see you guys next time for more great, awesome NASCAR content and other motorsports content on the channel like this. Take care, buddy.